Hello everyone, welcome to How to Propagate Basil. What we're going to do today is show you a way that you can make more basil plants without planting seeds, which saves a little bit of time and is just a good way to get healthy, stocky plants, because sometimes if you don't have enough sunlight, your seedlings can get really gangly and just sort of stretch. So this is a good way to avoid that, and it's also pretty economical because every time you cut something off of basil, you can turn it into a whole new plant. So what you're going to need today is some basil. You can either have a basil plant of your own, like for instance I have one up here and I could use some of that if I wanted to, but what I've done is bought some of the hydroponic basil from the store because that's available pretty much anywhere. So I'd like this video to be replicable wherever you are. So you'll need to find some source of basil. This was a few bucks in the store, I think. You'll need a chopstick, a pair of scissors, rooting powder, which we'll talk about in a second, and a pot. As for the size of the pot, the bigger the better, just because basil will grow and grow. I've seen it get 2 or 3 feet high. Also, I'm able to grow it in a very small container. It will just be happier with more room. If you can get something this size for a few plants, they'll be perfectly happy. So let's begin. What you're going to do first is over a sink, because it's going to be a little bit messy. You're going to take the roots of the plant, and you'll see that the stems actually grow pretty darn close together. So we're not going to worry too much about having to take them apart, but if you have to, just make sure that you don't rip any stems. You can pull them apart. You can see that kind of crevice right there in between, and you could pull that apart right there at that crevice and just pull these two apart. So I'm just going to use my nails, try my best not to damage the actual stem itself, but when the roots come apart, that's totally fine, because some of our plants are going to start with no roots at all. So that's no big deal. And then what we're going to do is, for each of those, we're going to take off all the little chunks. I believe that this is rock wool that they use, so we're just going to pull that off of there, because that's just empty, wasted space for our project. So go ahead and pull that out there. If roots come off, don't worry about it, but then what we're going to do is just try and ease those apart. That didn't take too much effort there, so that's a good little rootstock to start with. No worries there. So I'm going to get those all fabricated, and I'll show you what to do next. Alright, so here we have all of the basil plants ready. They no longer have much of that growing medium in their roots, and they are ready to be clipped. So now what we're going to do is basically transform all manner of sizes, whatever you have. So we have a big one and some medium ones and a tiny one. We're going to cut them all into relatively the same height of a plant. So we're going to cut the big one into smaller pieces, we're going to cut the mediums probably in half, and then that little one might be fine right where it is. We'll start with this little one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut this on an angle. Okay, so this would be a straight cut. You want to angle it like this, okay? You want about a 45-degree angle. I'm just going to cut it this way because it's okay. So you can see that angle there, and you want a clean cut. No, not a big deal. But then what we're going to do is take all of these, and it looks like these are actually, the medium ones I mentioned are actually small enough that we can just kind of cut the bottom away. But what I'm also going to do is, as I cut the bottoms off, I'm going to strip all of the leaves up till the top. And this is kind of hard to see, but you can see as I plucked a part of stem off, it's bringing some material away, and you want that. That's ideal. If you can get just even a little bit off, there's like a little nub here, I'm gonna just kind of get my nail and try and take a little piece off, if I can, and just bring a few strings away, and you can see that tiny little thread. That's not much. If you can get more, it's better. Hydroponic plants are pretty brittle, so you'll feel that leaves snap off really easy and things just come apart as opposed to peel off. You'll find that if you use a house-grown basil plant, that when you pull leaves off, a whole string will come off. And that's actually good for what we want to do, because when you open up those little wounds on the sides of the stem, that's where roots can grow from. So that's what we're going to do with all of these. Now this one's a bit bigger, and what we can do with this one actually is I'm going to cut the very bottom, I'd say 3 inches. I'm going to cut 3 inches down from this first set of leaves, and I hope you can see this here. So we have this stem here, and then we have this whole bunch here. So we have these 2 big leaves and these 2 little sprouts from each of those. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut right on the main stem, just like that. And that's a perfect little top there. That's going to grow real nice, I think. So that's one. And then what we have left is the top half, which what we can do is peel off some leaves. And again, if you can, get some of the little strings in there. Perfect. So you want to get some of that. Just like so. Sorry. Keep my eyes on the camera. And just take off any of this little foliage here. And now that's ready. If you want to plant it with the roots, you can. You just dig a little bit bigger hole and you stuff the whole thing down in there. But what I'm going to do is actually cut it off. So I'm going to do my angled cut. And I think I might actually rephrase what I mentioned earlier, in that we want the stem part, it's going to go underground. We want that to be probably about 1.5 inches to 2 inches long. It doesn't really have to be too long. Again, it depends on if you're working with a big pot. If so, then you can probably get away with going deeper, and your plants will probably be happier. So I'm just going to cut that, and that's going to be another little rooting there. And then so as you work from the bottom, you can find the next spot that you're going to kind of do a trim at, right about in there, and go down, to, we'll say 2.5 inches officially. No, it's really not a big deal as far as the length and precision of everything, but I know there's people out there who want to know exactly how long it needs to be, so there's your answer. Okay, so we have our pot, and you want your soil to be really moist. Just go ahead and soak it, drain it, and just have it ready to be very moist. And now what we're going to do preemptively, count how many little guys you have. So what you're going to do is take your chopstick, and if what you can do is choke up on it about how long the stems are going to be, and then you're just going to stab it in there. Make a little hole. Now what we're going to do is use the rooting powder. Now this stuff is the active ingredient is butyric acid, and you can see right there. You can get that almost, I think, at least at any gardening store, if not at any hardware store. I think it's actually a pretty common thing to come by, which if you don't like powders, chemicals, I don't, but I don't have access to this, you can go to a willow tree, and apparently if you steep, like if you take a piece of willow, crush it up, steep it in water, that water is the exact same thing as this powder. So basically this is just a plant hormone to help it grow roots. And what you're going to do, take a look in there. It looks kind of like talcum powder. There's nothing really offensive about it. It's pretty benign, so I just use my fingers. But what I'm going to do to applicate is put my finger in there, just like my pointer finger, tap a little bit, and you'll see I'll come out with some residue there too. Okay, there we go. So I would just tap off the excess, roll it around between my thumb and my finger, so I've got some on each. And then what I'm going to do is just take one of the stems that we've cut like so, and I'm just going to rub it on anywhere that we would have created wounds, and definitely the bottom there, and pretty much just everywhere. Give it a nice little thin coating, and then you're going to stick it right in the dirt. And I wouldn't leave much more than, I don't know, 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch of the stem between the leaves and the ground. And then continue. Each time I do a new plant, I will dip into the powder and refresh my fingers. I'll probably just, try and rub it all off on the root ball and assume that whatever contact it has with the actual roots will promote even more root growth. For the container, it doesn't really matter too much about size or depth or whatever. As I said, basil will be happier in bigger pots, but for me, I don't have any outside real estate yet, so I am forced to resort to using bottles for planters, which I highly recommend. Is a very resourceful thing to do, and the plants seem to be pretty happy, depending on the plant. Obviously, you can't grow like a zucchini in there, but yeah, I recommend trying out some different containers. And the more your basil grows, like say when it reaches this height, I can cut off this top little part and root it, so you can effectively have this endless cycle of basil plants and thoroughly enjoy it. I know I do. So this is Grown to be Wild, and thank you for watching.